people use language as a weapon in arguments, and it shows the power of correcting other people's language. I think that sometimes we try to make the argument or try to make ourselves believe that it doesn't really matter. It's just language. I'm just correcting where someone put a comma. People often pull out the you misspelled that, or you don't even know how to use an apostrophe as a way to win an argument, because they're taking it away from what we're arguing about, the content of the argument, and they're going up a level to you made this mistake, and so you're not even entitled to have an opinion that I find persuasive. So it's really powerful. And I would encourage people to recognize what's happening, as opposed to taking it personally and saying, oh my gosh, I did something stupid. I misspelled that. I am a bad language user. Okay, we all misspell things.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Don't know where you're at, but thank you for jumping in. I've got Anne. Anne, is it Anne Curzan or Curzan? Did I get it right the first time?
I tend to say it Anne Curzan because it de-emphasizes the rhyme.
Nice. And I thought I'd start with that only because you're amazing with words, right? I knew you'd have a thing. Got it right.
I am. I'm a linguist. I think a lot about names, among other things, because names matter. And interestingly, in my family, different people say my last name in different ways in terms of where the stress is. So it can be both Curzan and Curzan, but Anne Curzan is a little too rhymey
It
for
is.
me. And in fifth grade, there was a boy named Than McCann. And
Oh,
there was
no.
a lot of teasing that went on that involved trash cans and other such
Oh,
things.
no, that's terrible. Oh, well, it's good. It's memorable, right? So
Well,
thank
thank you.
Thank you for jumping in here. I really appreciate this. I want to start off with a fun question I wrote out for you. And well, at least it's fun for me. All right, let's see what you think. Uh, if you could invent a new word for a common but indescribable feeling, what would it be and what would it mean? It's a tough one. Sorry.
That is a hard question with no prep.
I know. But as I was reading, I'm like, the thing, you start off with Grammando, and I'm like, this is good. I'm going to catch on to that. And then you just go on these great tangents that I never thought of in reading your book. And I'm like, man, if she could create a word, I bet you she's got a ton of words. Let's go a little deeper. And that's where it came from, the idea.
Yeah. Well, I love the question. You're the first person to ask me the question. I sometimes get the question, you're clearly, I'm going to stall here while I think about it,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. Do
sometimes
it.
I get the question of what is my favorite word? And my favorite word is recombobulate.
Recombobulate. I love that word.
Recombobulate.
I learned that as a kid in a cartoon, probably. I remember recombobulate.
So there's discombobulate, which, to help make someone fall apart or become disorganized. There is no combobulate, but I think it was 2005, the American Dialect Society voted recombobulation area the most creative word of the year. And the recombobulation area is at the airport in Milwaukee. And it is the place where after you go through security, you recombobulate. You put your belt back on and put your stuff back in your bag because you've had to become discombobulated going through security. And I love this because I have to recombobulate several times a day. And I thought, I really want to make this word happen.
Hmm. That could be, that would make an amazing title to your next book. Like recombobulate. I'd be like, what is that? What are you talking about?
Oh, I hadn't thought about it as a book title, but
That's really good. I've never seen it anywhere. Like I said, I learned it when I was reading it in your book. I learned it in a cartoon, and I think it was DuckTales, but but I don't remember. It's for
well,
some
if
reason I think of DuckTales.
if you and your listeners can help us make it happen, I think that would be fantastic. And now I'm going to be thinking about it as a book title. I'm going to have to keep the question of what feeling would you want to name is such a profound one that I don't want to answer it
Yeah, listen.
lightly.
take your time
So
with this. We'll go other places and we'll come back to that one.
sounds great.
All right, let's start where you kind of start off in the book because you talk about the inner Grammando,
Hmm.
and I instantly went to how people on social media will correct you will correct me if I use the wrong grammar, misspell something, or just come up with something that just doesn't make sense to people. And they instantly go and be like, oh, that you're stupid. Hey, listen, Tristan, you can't spell what's going on. We live in an era on social where people aren't going to hold back what they feel and how they say it. And so my question is, how do you manage that internally so it doesn't affect your relationships on social media or in person?
Tristan, I think you're making such an important point here about the ways in which people use language as a weapon in arguments.
Yes.
And it shows the power of correcting other people's language. I think that sometimes we try to make the argument or try to make ourselves believe that it doesn't really matter. It's just language. I'm just correcting where someone put a comma. And sure, I'm a professor. There are times when I'm working to help students master the conventions of formal edited English, and I'm doing that work. But on a blog, in the comments, in a conversation on Reddit or wherever,
Yeah.
people often pull out the you misspelled that or you don't even know how to use an apostrophe
Hmm.
as a way to win an argument
Yeah.
because they're taking it away from what we're arguing about, the content of the argument, and they're going up a level to you made this mistake and so you're not even entitled to have an opinion that I find
Yeah.
persuasive. So it's
Interesting.
really powerful. And so to your question of how to think about that, I guess I would encourage people to recognize what's happening as opposed to taking it personally and saying, oh my gosh, I did something stupid. I misspelled that. I am a bad language user. Okay, we all misspell things. we I truly believe that every single one of us has confused the its and its in terms of where the apostrophe goes
Yep.
because it's confusing. And particularly on social media, we're often typing fast. So there are going to be mistakes. And to realize that when someone calls you out on that, it's a power play. And so to step back and say, okay, wait a
Mm.
minute, this is a rhetorical move on their part as part of this argument. And that may help you not take it personally and think about, okay, how do I want to respond to this as a rhetorical move? Because that's what they're doing is to try to they're shifting the terrain of the argument.
Interesting. I didn't think about that as a power play, but you're so right. So here's side note, and I run the largest online community of real estate agents in the world.
Hmm.
And that comes with massive problems. And so I when you said power play, I'm like, yeah, I've misspelled stuff. I said stuff that people don't agree with, and you get blasted. And I've learned over the time, as the one getting blasted, to put little hearts instead right after, and just be like, you know what, you're right, sorry, right? Kind of just step away.
Yeah, well, and this is something that we're seeing on texting and and social media is the use of emojis. So the little hearts or the smiley
Yeah,
faces or those sorts of things, as well as abbreviations like JK for just kidding or
yeah.
LOL. And young people have also repurposed punctuation such that the period is angry and exclamation marks are a way to show enthusiasm.
Yes.
Right, the period is angry. And the reason we need to do that is exactly what you're pinpointing, Tristan, that we're having these conversations online without the kind of context that we would have for spoken conversation. When we're in conversation with someone in person or even on Zoom, We can see their facial expression. We can hear the laughter. We have much more context to figure
Mhm.
out, is this serious? Is someone joking? And
Yes.
when we're texting and on social media, we don't have that context. What you've seen people do as a response is use emojis, punctuation, abbreviations to capture tone, facial expression, other
Mm,
important parts
mhm.
of, like, I'm nodding right now. I hear you.
Yeah.
We're using that so
Yeah.
that we can try to minimize the ambiguity, because it's hard to know on social media, is someone joking or being serious? And so we're using the tools at our disposal in writing to try to help people understand what we mean.
Okay. On that, as I was reading the book, I thought, how much have emojis impacted your world as a linguist?
I think we're still figuring out exactly the ways in which social media is changing language. We have never seen language spread the way it can right now. Or, for example, a new word. If you think
Mhm.
about, if there's a meme or a TikTok video or whatever, and it goes viral,
Mhm.
that, and it has some new word or new expression or new use of language in it, that can spread around the world in minutes.
Yeah, so true.
And we have never seen anything like that. When you think historically, if there was a change in language, a new word in Britain, for that to get to the United States early on, it had to get on a boat with a person, come
You're right,
across
so
the ocean.
slow.
Then later you'd have to have telephones, but again, that doesn't spread it in a mass media kind of way.
Mhm.
So we're watching this. Could this mean lots of little micro trends that don't last very long? Could this mean more rapid language change? I don't think we know the answer to that. What we can see is that it means that a lot of languages are coming into contact with each other through social media. And when languages come in contact, that can create change. So it's an exciting time to be a linguist because we're figuring out what this means. But I don't think it means we're not going to start talking like Twitter or X. People worried when we had the telegram, that the telegraph, that we were all going to start talking like that. This is one way of using the written language. Speech will not start to sound like social media, but we're now watching AI. So generative AI is changing the face of written language, and I don't think we
Mm.
know what that's going to do yet. So lots to watch at this moment, lots to figure out.
All right, so I've got two questions on that one. First one is, how do you see the increasing use of AI and the language models from what we have right now with the AI? How do you see that impacting the future of language? Have you thought? I'm pretty sure you've thought of that, but any thoughts on that?
I have some initial thoughts, but this technology is moving really quickly. And I worry
Yeah,
whatever I say will probably be outdated by next week. The first thing that I think about is the difference between spoken language and written language.
got it.
And historically, at least, most change originates in spoken language.
Like you said in your book. Got it. Yeah. That was,
Yeah.
by the way, I never thought of that. I'm like, oh, I love this progression. It makes sense. I never thought about it. So thank you.
Yeah. So occasionally something will first appear in writing. It will be an innovation in writing. But for the most part, change happens because we, as speakers, use the language creatively. If we just think about what's happening right now, I am producing a sentence that I have never produced exactly this way ever in my life, and you're understanding that sentence. And so the patterns that I use as a speaker will slowly change over time, and that will change the language. Or I might on the spot make up a new word because I need to say, oh, I was late because the route was so traffic lighty. And you know what I mean by traffic lighty, even though we're not going to find it in a standard dictionary. And,
Yeah.
odds are against traffic lighty suddenly becoming a viral sensation, but you never know.
True, true. You never know. I like the word.
And then one of the big drivers of change is kids as they learn the language. That
Mm.
one of my favorite descriptions from a fellow linguist is that every child, every baby is reinventing the language as they learn it. Because when you think about babies, they are awash in language or languages if they're in a bilingual home or a trilingual home. And they're just getting all this data. And
Hmm.
nobody's saying to them, this is an adjective and this is a determiner. They're just hearing all the data and they are figuring out the patterns of the language. And as they do that, they will find some new patterns. They'll reinterpret the data. And one of the examples that I use in the book relates to the title of the book, as you know, which is Why Do Little Kids Say Funner?
Yeah,
And I
I did.
know that funner rubs some people the wrong way. That's part of why I put it in the title of the book to just be a little provocative and a little bit fun. But the reason kids say funner is that fun is an adjective. Fun used to only be a noun. Early 20th century, it started to be reinterpreted as an adjective, again, probably by kids, because they heard a
Mm.
sentence like, the party was chaos. All right. That chaos is a noun. The party was fun. Fun is a noun, at least historically. But you could also say the party was great. The party was boring. The party was interesting. You could also
Mm.
slot an
Mm.
adjective in there.
Yeah.
And kids reinterpreted fun as an adjective. So
Yeah.
now you can say it was a fun party or it was very fun. So now we have to think about one syllable adjectives. If you take an
Mhm.
adjective like smart, and then you want to say that that person has more smarts than someone else, you would say smarter,
Smart.
smartest,
Yeah.
tall, taller, tallest, wide, wider, widest, fun, funner,
Listen,
funnest.
I'm all for it. I'm all for funner. Let's do this.
And the kids will win. In the long run, the kids will win. It may not be in our lifetime, probably won't be, but and I know we have listeners who are cringing right now. They're like, stop saying funner. This is driving me nuts. But I would guess that they may not have as strong a reaction to funnest. That
Interesting.
when I do polls of this, and American Heritage did some polls on this, that funnest doesn't irk people as much as funner. As a result, I think funnest will become standard usage first, and then funner will get
Mm.
to sneak in on its coattails.
It makes sense the way you described it. So thank you.
Of
All right. So
course.
question on that because you're saying kids kids push the language forward.
Hmm.
You may think of you made me think of social media
Hmm.
and how kids um, early teens and then late teens have pushed social media forward. They've decided which one breaks through, which one doesn't.
Hmm.
I had never thought until I read your book about correlating those two things. I was like, interesting. Why is that language and then the way they communicate is also within social, right? This is interesting. I go, um, what do you think the reason is for that? Is it because they don't have they don't have a full-time job, they're just in school together in a community, in a setting that they're forced to be all as a group and they can share ideas and be in a place together? I don't know. I'm asking, is there a correlation between them pushing the language forward at a young age to them also pushing what we as adults end up being on social media?
Hmm.
Or no correlation?
Oh no, these are great, great questions, I think. One of my fellow linguists describes young people as the movers and shakers of language change. And I think
Hmm.
it's a great description. You have first, as babies, as we talked about, they're reinventing the language. And then as young people, they are pushing, they're being creative, they're stretching the language. And one of the things that they're doing is rebelling against older people. Part of being young
Mm.
is pushing the boundaries against people who are older than you. And so they are creating slang. They're playing with language. And that, from
Mm.
what we can tell, is just part of youth culture, is to push back against authority. I think we certainly are seeing that young people are also pushing us on social media. I think a lot about how different their experience with social media, with computers, with the internet is than
Yeah.
mine. I'm not going to say exactly how old I am, but I am old enough that when I was in college, we didn't have access to the internet. So, my experience, I have come to social media well into adulthood, which means that it's not part of my social life in the same way that it is for young people, that social media is fully integrated into their youth culture and social life.
Mm.
And so I think the same kind of play and experimentation and pushing boundaries we're going to see there as well. And I
All right.
will say, Tristan, I feel incredibly lucky as a university professor that I get to hang out with young people. It
Yeah.
is energizing and inspiring. And how else would I know what was going on in the language? The reason that I know the period is angry in texting is because undergraduates told me years ago that the period was angry in texting. And I was like, oh, good to know. Very
That's
helpful.
funny. Yeah, you get all of those trending items really fast.
I do. And especially because I usually start my classes every day. The students have to teach me one or two new slang words before I'll start class.
Oh, that's cool.
It's great. And I've had students say, I always get to your class on time because I don't want to miss the slang.
That's a great way to start. That's pretty
It
awesome.
it is a great way to start because it also affirms for them that they're not ruining the language. They're not doing anything wrong. They are playing and experimenting. And so the fact that I want to learn about their slang and that I take it seriously as creative use of language is really empowering. And then when we get to things like social media and texting, and I say, help me understand the rules of texting, for many of them, they've never had anyone acknowledge that there is a nuanced set of rules for how they text. They've often heard older people say, young people are ruining the language and young people don't care about the written word and they just throw exclamation marks all over the place. From everything I can tell, that's not true. It's just a different system, and they
Yeah.
have repurposed punctuation and texting to do particular things. And when I set it up that way, and this really is a theme of the book as well, where I'm respecting their skill with language and texting, and they're teaching me about that, then I can say, you know what? I have spent a very large part of my life controlling the conventions of formal, edited, academic English. And I am happy to share that knowledge with you so that you can play that game really successfully. And you all are helping me be a better texter so that I can play that game more successfully. And it moves us away from this idea that there's one right way or correct way. And I'm using
Mm.
scare quotes, even though people can't see it. Um, to use the language, that there are different ways to use the spoken and written language depending on who your audience is and what the
Mm.
context is and what you're trying to get done. So, to talk more about effectiveness and linguistic choices as opposed to the quote unquote right way to use language.
All right. I love that.
Me
You
too. It's so much more fun as a way to think about
Yeah.
language, to teach language. And I have found that students and readers of the book find it freeing.
Yeah, that I did find it freeing in reading your book. I'm like, you're almost giving me the ability to be like, yeah, you know what? There's no right answer. It's just whatever it is right with the person using it. Just be a lot more forgiving. And I enjoyed that a lot from your
Oh,
book.
I'm really glad. And one of the analogies that I use in the book is of a toolbox. And I think about this a lot as a university professor because sometimes people will hear me talking about language and they will say, well, if there's no right answer, then Anne Curzan clearly has no standards about language at all. And I think that's not what I'm saying at all. My point is I want students and everyone to have the biggest possible linguistic toolbox. And so that's formal ways of using both spoken and written language and informal ways and scientific ways and maybe people who are using it for poetry or song. And I also want them to have the knowledge of which tools to use in which circumstances. So whoever's
Mm,
got the biggest toolbox and the knowledge of which tool do I need to do what I want to do today with this context and this audience, that's going to be the savviest, most effective speaker and writer.
got it. All right. So understanding your audience, understanding your tools and how to communicate with them and
Exactly.
how to use the tools. You reminded me of a as one of the people that I interviewed said that the way we use our tech really determines how we live our lives, something along those lines. And I was thinking as you were saying that we're shifting and growing along the lines of what we have the options to use and how we communicate. So we now can communicate by text. I don't know if you remember pagers. Like we'd have to figure out what one, two, three meant and
I
one, one, two.
do.
So um, we can communicate by text, right? So we have to learn how to best communicate with people to not offend them, but to connect with them. Or if we want to
Mhm.
offend them, great. Uh, Social media, right?
Yep.
And that comes in so many different formats in video, in texting, messaging. And now we have, which is a little weird because AI allows me to just reword the email I was about to send out or even reword the text.
Mhm.
And if I'm sending that out and they're rewording it, am I just communicating with AI at that point? Like, is AI communicating with AI and where does that leave me? What do you think of all this?
Uh, I don't know yet. I think this question of, if I'm using AI and this other person uses AI, where did the humans
Where am I?
go?
Am I even in there?
The one thing I'll put on the table right now, because as I said, we're all trying to figure this out in real time, is that written language cannot tolerate the level of ambiguity that spoken language can, especially when we're speaking in person. And I
Mm,
really wish somebody had told me that as an emerging writer, because it's
mm,
one of the things that makes writing hard is that in speech, if you and I are in the same place, we use a lot of shortcuts, we use a lot of context. I can say things like, oh, that's interesting. And I'm pointing, or, there's just an understanding that you know what that is when I say that's
yeah.
interesting. And as a writer, I can't leave those sorts of things ambiguous because if you misunderstand, I'm not there to fix it. I'm not there to see the confused look on your face or to see you react in a way I didn't mean for you to react. And now I'm not there to fix it.
Mm,
So it's one of the things that makes texting so difficult is that,
yeah.
and it goes back to our conversation about emojis and punctuation, that it can be ambiguous and it can go so wrong. And all of us have had experiences where it goes really wrong really fast.
Yeah.
Um, And it's not that that doesn't happen in speech, but in speech we're there to catch it much more quickly. We may not even notice that it's going to go really wrong because we can see just the seeds of
Yeah.
something going wrong and we can fix it.
And we're much more forgiving if we're listening.
We are.
Interesting. Ah, I didn't know that. You're right.
We are. So the one piece of advice that I sometimes give is when people say, "Well, what should people do when texting goes really wrong?" or you send out an email and someone gets upset and my fundamental answer is get off email, get in person.
Oh, got it. And I think it's in stages too, right? So get off of text or email. Next would be a phone call, or
Yep.
one of my friends, Ryan Serhant, he said, dude, I just get if I can't do anything else, I get on FaceTime. And
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And I love the way you put it of people when you see someone and you can see their facial expressions or even on the phone, hear the tone of their voice, it brings
Mhm.
the human back in and we can do a lot of repair work that it's very hard to do on
Repair
email and
word.
text. And so people often will be coming to me saying, "Well, what kind of email should I send to fix this?" And I was saying,
No email.
get off. This is not going to get better at this point.
Well, hold on, because I agree with you. But I sometimes, so I'm more of an introvert, right?
Uh-huh.
And I think growing up in a world where I don't have to show up as much because it's okay to Zoom, it's okay to be on social and text. It's almost like the world we're in right now rewards you for not showing up in person. It's like you could get it done somewhere else. And sometimes it's a lot easier for me to do it in email. So I understand that world, and I
Yeah.
struggle sometimes knowing that I have to pick up the phone or even meet them in person and being like, I know that that's the better thing. How do you have that issue or no? Is it not like,
Oh, absolutely. And I think often when we do get ourselves to pick up the phone or see the person in person, we remember how vital those human
yeah,
connections
we
are.
totally do. We're like, oh,
So I'm not going to say that sometimes the hurdle isn't big or challenging and you think, "Oh, but couldn't I just send the email and I can sit here and I can craft it and I can make sure it says exactly what I want to say." I completely get it. And I know that that human connection, even on Zoom, where you can see someone, is vital for
yeah,
us.
I agree. I agree. I just want to know if you had that challenge too.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. All right. Shifting a little bit.
Yeah.
You you did a lot of research in this book. I would imagine you did just from reading it. What was something you found surprising in the research that you did? You're like, oh, this is cool. Or you pieced something together. They're like, I didn't see that before.
Well, again, Tristan, you asked the best questions. I I will share the biggest change that happened in writing the book, and it goes back to this inner Grammando, inner Wordy issue. So Grammando, for folks who haven't read the book, is a word that was introduced to me in the New York Times Sunday magazine by Lizzie Skernick in this little column called That Should Be a Word. And I
Mm.
completely agreed that Grammando should be a word. And she defines it as someone who is constantly correcting other people's grammar. And I thought, oh, what a great word. It gets me away from grammar police or grammar Nazi, which I don't particularly like those terms. And here's a fun, playful word that I can use. So I took that word and then I needed the contrast. And for the contrast, I used wordy. So a wordy is like a foodie, but for words. So
Got it.
someone who enjoys words, and Merriam-Webster put it in their dictionaries in 2018. So I had the grammandos and the wordies, and when I started writing the book, I thought what I was doing was writing a book to grammandos to help them become wordies. And what I realized in writing the book, which was such an exciting breakthrough for me, was no, what I think I mean is that every single one of us has in our head a little inner grammando and a little inner wordy, including
Mm.
me. I mean, I'm a linguist. I study language change. It keeps me in business. I need the language to change. But even I will sometimes hear something in the language, and my little inner Grammando goes, yuck, I don't like that change.
That's funny.
And so it is very humanizing, I think, to say all of us have these two voices because all of us actually also enjoy language. You think about right now on our phones, people who are playing Wordle and
Hmm.
spelling bee, people who like to rap and pun and rhyme, Scrabble, Boggle, bananagrams. We enjoy language. We like to play with it. So we all have that little inner wordy. And my goal is to help people feed their inner wordy, that kind of curiosity about language, that joy in language, to want to build the toolbox and feel empowered to do that. And then also have people's inner grammandos be better informed. So that
Mm.
before you correct someone or before you decide to be really grumpy about something, to ask some questions. Am I right? Where did that come from? Am I on solid ground here?
Mm.
And that for me was also a more fun way to write the book was to say, I'm trying to help your inner Grammando be fully informed and empower your inner wordy to be playful. And one of the analogies I also came to in the book, which was such fun, was to think about birders or bird watchers
Mm. Mm.
and
Yes.
to think, okay, could you, by empowering your inner wordy, adopt the mindset of a birder or a bird watcher? So, when a birder sees a new bird, they're curious about the bird.
Yeah.
How does the bird fly? What color is the bird? Where does it come from? How does it behave? And could we do that when we hear a new word or a new pronunciation or new patterns in social media? Could we be curious what's going on there as opposed to what I think we often do with new language, which is kill it?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what, because we're very opinionated,
We are.
it's part of being human. But I loved and I don't know if this was a purposeful undertone as a generalization for how we are as humans and how we should approach everything, not just language. But you made me feel like I should really take a step back and say, well, maybe I should be more curious in general, like before judging people, before approaching this, before going into this. And I really felt that. I was like, this is a really good message overall. So
Oh, that means the world to me, actually, that was coming through as an undertone. I think there's a reason that I use the word kinder next to funner in the subtitle
I was hoping that was it.
of
I
the
was like,
book.
you led with kinder too. I was like,
Yeah, that we can be kinder to each other about language when we're curious, when we say, oh, what an interesting way to use language that young people are doing, or that people in this
mm,
part of the United States that I've never been to, look at the way they use language. What an interesting thing,
yeah.
because it's such an important part of the human experience. So I love the curiosity. As you can tell, I think what I study is such fun. And part of the fun is also, and this goes back to your question of the research for the book, one of my favorite things to do, and this reveals just how geeky I am, and I'm going to put this on the table. I read old grammar books.
Mm,
This entertains me to no end. So I read grammar books from the 1800s, 1700s to go back and look at what did they think was good language and bad language? What did they think was
wow.
correct and incorrect? And what you discover is that it quickly destabilizes your notion of what is right and wrong. So you see Benjamin Franklin in the 18th century saying the verb colonize is a terrible verb. I give it up as bad.
Oh, really?
And you're like,
It's awesome.
huh, huh, that seems a little odd. Or Richard Grant White in the 19th century, who said donate is a terrible verb that was formed by some ignorant person from donation,
Oh my
which
God.
is true. We had the word donation first, it was a borrowing. And then, if there's a donation, well, what happened? Somebody must have donated something. So
Yeah.
we back formed donate, and Richard Grant White thought that that was a terrible, terrible
Hmm.
verb. But of course, we back form all the time. We had editors before we had edit. Or you think about like a television. What does a television do? It
Mm.
televises things. So we back formation is a really productive process. And there is one that is going on around us that our listeners may know about, especially if they hang out with young people, which is that there are now many young people who can use verse to mean play against.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you haven't heard this yet?
No verse.
Okay, watch for it.
Hmm.
You will hear young people say, "Oh, who's your team versing?" Or University of Michigan versed Ohio State last weekend.
That's cool.
Thank you. It is cool. But I first learned about it because parents in Ann Arbor, which is where I live, came to me and said, "My kid keeps saying verse, 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 and make it stop." And my reaction was, "That's so cool." Because what I believe has happened is that it's coming from versus the Latin versus, often abbreviated VS period. But if you think about a kid who hears an announcer on television or the radio and they say, "Tomorrow, the Thunder versus the Heat,"
Mm-hmm.
or Nadal versus Federer, that sounds exactly like tomorrow, the Thunder plays the Heat. Nadal plays Federer. Versus and plays both sound like verbs.
Mm,
And
yes.
so kids have backformed the verb verse to mean play against. And it's actually a really efficient way to say play against. It saves you two syllables.
You know what you just made me think of? Because I love this. I think that's what I enjoyed your book. You made me think like the is in our life is the way we're approaching life. Because you're
Oh,
telling me like kids, right? They're so playful. They want to break things in a good way. Like, let's
mm-hmm.
challenge this, right?
Right.
Let's make it our own. And then we get into a place where we're like, no, 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 this is how it's done, right? This is and then and then we shift. And then we often hear those like great entrepreneurs or people that are great inventors are like, hey, don't lose, or artists, don't lose that playfulness, right? Interesting. I didn't piece it together until you were mentioning that.
That is a beautiful point. It's really a beautiful point, I think, of not losing the sense of playfulness, the sense of experimentation. And
With
you do
language, with
with
your
language, and you do see it with language. And I think because many of us, to get where we've gotten, have devoted a lot of time and energy to controlling a particular set of rules for formal language. And
yeah.
then we see a lot of gatekeeping that happens around that knowledge of, to have access to this job or this power, you have to go through the same thing that I went through, without recognizing that the language is going to keep changing. The rules for the gatekeeping are also going to change, and we could open the gates wider. We really could. So I love the point you're making of the same way that entrepreneurs say, don't lose that sense of play, of curiosity, of not being scared that things are going to be different, that
Hmm.
we were often less scared of when we were young, and
And
then
then
applying that to language.
your point earlier, I wrote it down where we were talking about how people use language as a weapon, as a power play,
Hmm.
right? And that's interesting. I'm just like now circling back. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
this is all good. How'd you get into linguistics? How'd you get into this whole thing?
It's a great it's a fun story in that I actually went to college as a math major.
Oh.
And I was a very mathy kid, really enjoyed math. And I tell undergraduates this all the time because they will often come to college saying, I know exactly what I'm going to major in and minor in. And I say, if you'd asked me that in my second month of college, I would have said, I'm a math major. And I didn't even really know what linguistics was when I went to college. I did like languages, I liked learning languages. So I took an introductory linguistics class my first year of college, and it was good, but I was still a math major. And then my second year of college, I took a course called The History of the English Language. And I thought it was
Hmm.
the coolest thing I had ever encountered. I mean, she knew the answer to questions that I didn't even know I wanted to know the answer to, but why is kernel spelled with an L and pronounced with an R? And when was double negation standard in English, which it was for many, many centuries? And just all these things where I thought, I've always wanted, I'm so curious about this. And that changed
Really?
my trajectory. Was that class? I
Wow.
became a linguistics major and I have been studying the history of the English language ever since and having the best time because it also means, as I said, I get to, in a university context, be with the movers and shakers of language change and be inspired by them all the time. It's one of the
Interesting.
real joys of being a faculty member.
I That's a cool story. And now when I think of linguists, so before interviewing you, before talking to you, I've I in my head romanticized linguists, like Indiana Jones. Okay.
Ah,
So
yeah.
um J.R.R. Tolkien, right?
Mhm.
And then obviously Klingons, right? So
Obviously.
obviously. So, so I'm like, man, she's cool. I want to talk to her.
Yeah, well, and linguistics is a really broad field. So you have people studying the structure of many different languages, people studying sound systems and grammars and history. So I'm a historian of language. And I focus particularly on English. You also have people studying language acquisition, how do kids learn language and computational linguistics. So there's lots
Wow.
there. But as someone who is a historian of the English language, I firmly believe, as any historian would tell you, that history is happening all around us. So I studied Beowulf, which is English used 1,000 years ago, and that is incredibly interesting. And I study slang and texting because that's the history of English right now. And I study everything in between. And I can't imagine a more fun thing to get to do.
That's awesome. That's very cool. All right, so what would be something that you're currently reading that's not a dictionary? Like what do you love reading?
Okay. I love that you called me out on that.
Well, you
I'm like,
mentioned earlier,
I
you're
don't
like,
know.
Tristan, I bust out like a dictionary from the 1800s. It's like, okay, that's cool.
So I'm always reading a novel. That was something maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I thought I'm not reading enough novels. And I just committed to having a novel going all the time. And
Now,
it's
do you read old novels to understand the language, like classics, or more new?
I sometimes read old, but mostly contemporary. And
Okay.
so the book that I just recently finished was James by Percival Everett,
I
which
was
is
going to bring that up. I was like, I
brilliant.
bet you're attracted to James to see how they merge or they stay within the Mark Twain world. Like,
Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant in terms of the ways in which he is playing with and framing and challenging people's understanding of African American English and standardized American English. I loved the book. I have many, many questions for the author,
mhm.
which I don't know whether I'll get to ask, but I would absolutely, for anyone interested in language, it's a great book.
I've been wanting to pick that one up to read it. I have it, but I have not picked up to read it yet. So, oh, I like that. That's cool. All right, what are you eyeing right now to read? Or you're like, ooh, should I read this or that?
Oh, um, that's good. I was going back to the things I've read recently that I've loved as opposed to what I'm eyeing to read next, because I always have a list on my phone. But I'm also going to recommend Remarkably Bright Creatures,
I
which
haven't seen that. Remarkable.
um,
Let me look that
part
up.
of the book is told through the lens of an octopus.
Oh, really? That's cool.
I
Oh, I
just
see
think that
this.
that is very clever.
Really? Holy cow. That's got a lot of reviews on Goodreads. Whoa.
Yeah, that book really took off. And it's a very fun read.
This is cool. I'd never heard of it. All right. I'm adding this. Very different. All right.
Yes, that's what I thought. I'm going to recommend a couple books that are quite different.
All right. Best book of book talk, too. So very popular on TikTok.
And do you have a book that you would recommend that I read?
I stick to a lot of nonfiction.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, I go back to fantasies like fiction, sci-fi.
Yeah,
That's why I brought up J.R.R. Tolkien. But book-wise, I think if I'm looking at, if I'm, have you ever read, and you may have, but Lord of the Flies back in the
I
day?
have read Lord of the Flies,
Okay.
but
So
but
I
it's
love
been
flies.
long enough that that might merit a reread, actually, because that the messages of that book are powerful.
Yeah, I read it a long time ago, then I reread it, and then we're living in a very interesting world right now in the United States. And I
Mhm.
feel like Lord of the Flies. It's like, what is going on? Because I just reread it and it's fresh on my mind. I'm like, um,
Well, what I also love about that is it's a reminder about the power of literature. And at this moment, when I think sometimes people are saying, why study the humanities? Why read literature? Is that literature does often give us a new lens to think about the human experience, to think about the moment we're living through. One of the things I often talked about, I was the dean for the last 5 years at the University of Michigan. And one
wow.
of my favorite expressions, which I actually stole from another dean, is that empathy is not just a value, it's a skill. And it is a skill that we hone over time. And empathy, the ability to understand the world or try to see the world from perspectives that are different from your own. And literature helps us do this. Studying history helps us do this. Culture, language, music, all of that is building that empathy muscle. And I think it's one of the most important muscles we have is realizing that the way we experience the world is different from the way other people experience the world and using
Mm,
all of these parts of culture to try to broaden our understanding and see the world through different lenses. And I've always loved that as a way to think about the power of literature and music and languages and history is that it's helping us with that empathy.
I agree with you. I didn't think about that earlier, but I think it applies to us more now. So I live in the social media world and
Hmm.
I see how fast it is and how fast things can go south.
Yeah.
And and when you were talking about the empathy is a skill, and then attaching it to literature, I think you're right on because I'm feeling like literature right now allows us in the current world that we're in to look at different perspectives and not immediately judge them like we do on social because
Hmm.
it's a progressive thought that's being released in what we're reading. And it's like, oh, and then we can't judge it because it's like stuck on a book. It's like we can't,
I
well, I'm
love
not going to
that.
text you back and be like, well, I don't agree with that shit. So that's interesting. I love
I,
that.
I do too. That you're sitting in it and with it. Um, and I think this might be a moment we can also circle back to something that you caught that I said, and I think it's important, which is language, the power of language as a tool, as a weapon. And I think about, so it is one of our most powerful tools as human beings, and it's powerful to hurt, but also to heal.
Mm,
Right? I mean, so it's powerful to exclude, but also to include, to disinform or misinform, and to inform.
hmm.
So it,
So
it
true.
also helps me as a speaker and a listener, a reader and a writer, think about that it is powerful and we can use language for such good purposes. And it brings us back to this kinder world in which language is one of our key tools for doing that.
Hmm. You gave me a lot more clarity when we're talking uh, about some parts of your book, and I kind of understand more what you're writing about, which is really good. I love
Well,
this.
I'm grateful because you've also given me some new ways to put some of the pieces together. And that's such a fun part of a conversation is that I'm coming away with new ways to think about it too.
This was awesome. I love this. I think what you're doing is more amazing than somebody may think just look glancing at it, because I think words right now mean so much more because the way we're communicating moves so fast, and words matter much more now, I think, than they did before because it spreads so fast. So keep up the awesome work.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for inviting me for this conversation. It has been such fun.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for being on. I appreciate you.